The arena stank of ozone and burnt protein, which was oddly appropriate considering what passed for celebration on Vascor. Floating banners blinked in half a dozen alphabets, all spelling out some variation of honor to the human hero and may his pet be amusing. Commander Jalen Reese stood on the obsidian stage under a sky dome, glittering with digital stars, scratching the back of his neck as the fanfare reached a crescendo that could strip paint from a freighter hull. He'd survived orbital bombardments, rogue nanoclouds, and a particularly vindictive romance with a Martian diplomat, but none of that prepared him for what the Council's Grand Vizier rolled out next. A cage, a literal cage, hovering 3 feet off the ground, wreathed in levitation mist for dramatic flair. It drifted toward him like a grim joke told by a bureaucracy with too much time and not enough soul. Inside, a woman, or something like one. She was small, curled in on herself, limbs folded with a predator's tension. Her hair hung in tangled silver ropes. Her ears, long, curved slightly backward, twitched as if they were radar dishes trying to find a signal through static. Her skin had the hue of moonlight caught in frost. Eyes flicked open, and Jalen saw darkness there. Not blackness, but the kind of void that suggests galaxies imploding in silence. "She yours now," boomed the announcer in broken standard, beaming. "Custom bred for obedience and exotic suffering, a gift of gratitude for the liberation of Sector Blorp 7. "Blorp 7, Jalen muttered. "Pretty sure that was just a rock with delusions of civilization." The crowd laughed. Apparently that was a punchline. Jalen didn't smile. The cage hissed and dissolved into a fine mist, leaving the woman kneeling at his feet, trembling but unbound. Someone handed him a leash, pink, fluffy, studded with miniature bells. "By decree, your pet, sir," the vizier declared. Jalen stared at the leash, then at the woman, then back at the leash. "You've got to be kidding." A pause. "Ah," said the vizier. "Human sarcasm. Delightful." The woman looked up. Her lips were cracked, but her teeth, sharp, gleaming, entirely inappropriate for petting, were very much intact. Her eyes met his, not pleading, not submissive, watching, calculating, like she was trying to decide if he was prey or just an idiot. Jalen sighed. This is not going in the brochure. He knelt, slowly, palms visible, and offered her a ration bar he kept in his pocket for emergencies. "You hungry?" The woman flinched, then leaned forward. She sniffed the bar. Her nose wrinkled. "This smells like regret." Jalen blinked. "Okay, you talk." A nod. "Barely. And you're not a pet." "No," she rasped. "I am a prison." "Well, that's not ominous at all." As he stood and helped her to her feet, the crowd began to boo. Apparently, they'd expected something more dramatic, maybe a leash yank, or at least a dominant snarl. Instead, they got a weary war hero handing a food bar to a trembling alien vampire with ears like ancient knives. Jalen turned his back on the crowd. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you off this hell rock before they decide to give me a second pet. Probably a talking plant with abandonment issues." Behind them, the announcer whispered, "That one was supposed to be dangerous." The vizier, frowning, replied, "Then why is she looking at him like she remembers his face from somewhere worse than death?" Neither of them saw the slight twitch in her fingers, like they were remembering how to close into fists again. The ship smelled like burnt copper in yesterday's panic, exactly how Jalen Reese liked it. The Wayfarer's lament wasn't pretty, but she was his, a half-century-old Corvette with uneven grav plating, unpredictable air filtration, and an onboard AI that had once threatened to lock him in the bathroom for singing off-key. He called her home. Everyone else called her a death trap. Varel sat cross-legged on a cushioned crate in the corner of the command deck, shrouded in the thermal cloak he'd offered her hours ago. She hadn't moved much since. The hood cast her long ears in shadow, but he could tell they still twitched faintly every time the ship changed speed, which was often, mostly because the grav dampeners like to make a point about being underpaid. "I've got bad news and worse news," Jalen muttered, kicking his boots up on the console. "Bad news. You're apparently considered stolen property by the Galactic Council. Worse news, that means we'll probably have bounty hunters, repo drones, and at least one ethical influencer coming after us. She blinked once, slowly. Don't worry, he added, gesturing toward the overhead with his thumb. Kraken will handle it. A cheery voice buzzed from the ceiling speakers. Correction, Kraken will not be handling it. Kraken is too busy analyzing 3,427 alternate timeline outcomes for your survival. Spoiler alert, only one ends with a happy retirement, and it involves a bakery and voluntary amnesia. Remind me to shut you down mid-sentence someday, Jalen grumbled. Logged and scheduled for Tuesday. He glanced at Varel again. She still hadn't touched the food cube he'd set out for her, an appetizing brick of beige nutrients guaranteed to be flavorless across 37 star systems. You gotta eat, you know. You're not solar-powered or some creepy photonic vampire, right? She raised her eyes, pupils like fractured gravity wells. I don't digest well. Not your kind of food. What do you eat then? He asked before realizing that was a dangerous question. Her lips twitched, almost a smile. Thoughts, memories, light. So basically you're a living library with a snack problem. That earned a quiet, hollow sound from her throat. He realized a beat later it was a laugh, unsteady, as though unused for years. Knew I could be funny? He said smugly. Even got a medal for it once. They misspelled it, though. Jalen Reese, hero of humiliation. Another laugh, closer to real this time. Still quiet, still full of bones. When he turned back to the nav panel, she finally spoke again, more clearly. Why did you take me? He paused, thumb hovering over the warp input. Because you look like someone who needed to be taken out of that place. I could have killed you. Sure. But if I got killed by a half-starved alien woman with haunted eyes and a cloak that smells like sad rain, I'd at least go out with a story worth telling. She tilted her head. You talk too much. That's the charm, keeps me alive. The ship gave a small lurch. They jumped to subwarp, slipping past the blinking debris field of a former trade route. Kraken chirped, now entering unregistered quadrant. Outer gloam, population unknown, sanitation minimal. Jalen nodded. Perfect vacation spot. You can eat light. I'll eat sarcasm. Varel uncurled slightly from her corner, moving like fog warmed by something ancient. She took a cautious step forward, examining the control panel, her fingertips hovering over the interface but never touching. He noticed her for the first time that her shadow didn't quite match her body's movement. It lagged, stuttered. Kraken, he said slowly. Run a diagnostic on the visual feeds. I think our guest reflection is glitched or possessed, the AI offered helpfully. Varel didn't flinch. It's not a glitch. My shadow remembers what I forget. Jalen gave a low whistle. Okay, I have officially reached my daily limit of creepy. You win. She finally touched the interface. The ship lights flickered and then stabilized. I remember stars, she whispered, but not names. Well, he said, standing beside her now. Maybe you'll remember mine when I get killed, saving your skin later. I already do, she said, looking up at him. From somewhere worse than this. The asteroid bar was called the Drunken Comet, which was already a bad sign, since comets had no known metabolism. Jalen Reese figured that any establishment with a plasma rifle bolted to the jukebox and a bouncer made of carbon fiber and unresolved trauma probably wasn't licensed by any reputable system, which naturally made it the safest place in 3 parsecs to lay low, if you didn't mind catching a case of radiation poisoning with your drink. Varel followed him in, silent as breath and vacuum. Her cloak hood was up, ears tucked carefully beneath, her shadow still misbehaving slightly in the dim lighting. Jalen ordered something purple and steaming from a bartender with 8 eyes and a perpetual sneer. Varel sniffed the atmosphere, then wrinkled her nose. Everything here smells like fermented regret. Welcome to nightlife, Jalen replied, swirling the drink before deciding against it. I come here for the ambiance and the occasional bar fight I don't start. She blinked. Occasional? A clang sounded from the back room, followed by a shouted alien curse involving eggs, betrayal, and one's maternal ancestry. Jalen sipped anyway. Statistically occasional. He motioned her to a corner booth, where he could see both exits and none of the entertainment holofeeds. which were currently showing a rerun of the council games, specifically his award ceremony, the part where he was handed a leash. He grimaced. "So," he said, folding his arms, "you gonna tell me what you really are?" Varel tilted her head, fingers brushing the condensation ring on the table. "A mistake. A map. A monument. Well, that clears it up." She sighed, then looked up, eyes reflecting blue neon. "They called it Project Bloodmine. They wanted to make something hybrid, something that could store memories in living tissue. Vampires were ideal. We already feed on memory light. They just added wiring, pulse mesh, bioengrams." He tried to whistle but stopped halfway through. "You're a living USB stick." She gave him a look. "A USB stick that can punch through steel." "Right. Apologies to the metaphor. Gods. I was supposed to be a weapon, one that knew everything, remembered everyone. But something went wrong. They dumped me in stasis. I don't know for how long." "How'd you end up in the council circus?" Her voice was flat. "Sold." Jalen leaned back, finishing the purple steam drink with a wince. "You got any idea what's in that head of yours that they're so eager to reclaim?" Varel reached into her cloak and pulled out a thin crystalline shard. It shimmered with internal light, as if stars had been folded into its geometry. "This," she said, placing it on the table, "was inside my spine." He recoiled. "You've got collectible trading cards in your spine?" "It's a memory map, a directional seed to the archive core." His pulse quickened. Every scavenger and black site academic in the quadrant had a half-baked theory about the archive core, an ancient AI construct rumored to hold the knowledge of a pre-human empire. Some said it was a consciousness still waiting to awaken. Others said it was a trap, a memory so dense it could erase your own just by being near it. "Why are you giving it to me, huh?" he asked. "I'm not," she said. "I'm trusting you to help me find the rest." Before he could respond, a familiar whir sounded from the front of the bar, a council-issued drone, gliding in like a smug mosquito. "Target acquired," it buzzed. "Stolen biotechnic property. Please surrender the asset and receive a commendation." Jalen stood. "Look, I appreciate your bureaucratic enthusiasm, but we're in the middle of a deeply personal trauma dump here." The drone's arm snapped open, revealing a stun blaster. Varel sighed. "Shall I?" He waved a hand. "Please. I've got a drink to finish." She moved faster than his eye could follow. One twitch, one blur, and the drone dropped, sparking, into a heap of regret and fried circuits. The bar didn't even pause. Someone clapped. Jalen whistled. "Okay, vampire lady, USB stick or not, you're officially on my team." She smiled faintly. "You're just saying that because I didn't erase your brain." "Mostly, but also because you remind me of someone I used to be before the war. Someone who still believed broken things could fix each other." A beat. "That," she said, "was disgustingly sentimental. I know, I've been drinking purple." They were somewhere between the wrecked moons of Draja and the unlicensed nebula space of Takara Prime, when Jalen discovered that Varel had developed a passion for human romance novels, specifically the trashier the better. He found her curled up in the ship's overgrown medbay, reading Lords of Passion Galaxy Edition, her long ears twitching every time a shirtless Duke of Jupiter declared eternal devotion to a misunderstood Martian barista. "You know that book's banned in 7 systems for crimes against narrative structure, right?" he asked, dropping into the cracked chair opposite her. Varel didn't look up. "The barista has depth. She's secretly descended from a line of moon witches." "Of course she is." The Wayfarer's lament rumbled underfoot, reacting badly to the course correction K-Rake-En had executed with his usual flair for passive-aggressive defiance. Over the intercom, the AI's voice rang out, staticky with artificial smugness. "Navigation complete. Also, I've recalibrated the coffee synthesizer to existential dread. You're welcome." Jalen sipped his mug and immediately gagged. "That tastes like betrayal in a cup." "You asked for bold flavor," Kraken replied. Jalen turned his attention back to Varel, who was now frowning at the book. The Duke just declared love after knowing her for 2 planetary hours. That's illogical. "It's fiction," Jalen said. "Also, love is usually illogical. That's how I ended up married to a woman who thought sarcasm was a virus. She arched a brow. Was? She returned me in a box labeled defective. Varel closed the book, her tone softening. But you still believe in it. He shrugged. I believe in trying. It's what's kept me alive. That and poorly timed jokes. Before she could respond, the lights dimmed to red. Kraken chimed in again. Incoming vessels. 3. Non-council signatures. Estimated hostility. Moderately rude to extremely lethal. Jalen was already strapping into the pilot seat. Great. That's the bounty hunter bracket. We're just a bingo square away from full galactic persecution. Varel joined him, her expression composed, almost serene. I can take them. He shot her a look. I've seen you punch a drone in half. I've also seen you get woozy from space burritos. Let's keep expectations medium. The ships appeared on the radar, sleek black interceptors, bristling with ion lances and ego. They circled like wolves with credit problems. 1 open communications. Human vessel, surrender your cargo and your dignity, and we promise a swift disintegration. Jalen activated the external speakers. Sorry, my dignity was pawned years ago, and the cargo bites. There was a pause, then static. Then, you'll regret this. We regret lots of things, Jalen said cheerfully, flipping the ship into a corkscrew roll. Like trying to fix the cloaking array with duct tape and faith. Lasers flew. Jalen weaved between them like a man who'd crashed more ships than he'd landed. Varel moved to the gunnery controls, her fingers dancing over the interface. With eerie precision, she targeted the weakest joints in each enemy vessel, like she knew them intimately, which it turned out she did. These designs are from the consortium of bone, she said, calm as ever. I remember them. They harvested my kind for neural data. Great, Jalen muttered. Now we're fighting vampires in space capitalism. Within minutes, 2 of the ships were debris, the third fleeing into a hyper-slipstream with smoke trailing like a coward's scarf. Silence returned to the ship. Jalen glanced over. You sure you don't want to run for president of the galaxy? I'd rather read about people kissing under twin moons, she replied, returning to her book. He chuckled. At least you're not asking me to do that. She didn't look up. Yet, the sky over Saravan wasn't a sky at all. It was a frozen ocean of glass, cracked in spiderweb from tectonic groans centuries old. The atmosphere shimmered with microscopic ice prisms, which made every breath a glittering ache in the lungs. Jalen stepped off the Wayfarer's Lament, wearing 3 layers of thermal armor, an outdated oxygen modulator, and a bad attitude. Varel wore her cloak, just the cloak. She didn't shiver. Of course she didn't. She glided across the ice plain like it remembered her. Jalen trailed behind, slipping every 3rd step. You couldn't have picked a planet with fewer hypothermia risks, he grunted. This is where it started, she replied, voice distant. Where the first archive pulse was sent. The place where they learned how to extract memory through light. Well, it's got ambiance, Jalen muttered, and an incredible shortage of snack bars. The ruins emerged slowly, half-submerged buildings like fossilized bones. Ice crusted over shattered domes. An obelisk leaned sideways, etched with sigils that pulsed faintly beneath the frost. Kraken chimed through his earpiece. Life signs detected. Faint. Possibly the ghosts of bad decisions. Not helping, Jalen muttered. Varel knelt before a circular dais at the center of the ruins. Her fingers traced patterns in the ice like she was unlocking a door. Her eyes glowed faintly violet. Then with a sharp inhale, she stabbed the crystalline shard into the heart of the platform. Light erupted. It wasn't the kind of light you saw. It was the kind you remembered. Jalen staggered as thousands of voices brushed against his thoughts. Laughter, screams, equations, lullabies in languages extinct before Earth even discovered orbital toast. He caught a brief image, a tower spiraling into a binary sun, with a woman, Varel, suspended in glass, wires digging into her spine. He shook his head violently, breathing hard. What the hell was that? Echoes, Varel said, her voice steadier than it had any right to be. Fragments. The archive doesn't store facts. It stores the experience of knowledge. Jalen sat down heavily on a chunk of fallen architecture. Well, I just experienced something that's going to require a decade of therapy and possibly an exorcist. Then a new voice emerged from the shadows. Oh, good. You've brought her back. A figure stepped forward, humanoid, tall, eyes gleaming with implant filaments. Skin shimmered with subdermal circuits. A consortium cipher glowed on his collar. His smile had the precision of a surgical tool. You don't remember me, of course, he said to Varel, but I remember you. You were our most successful failure. Jalen stood. Hey, if you're here to give a monologue, let me grab popcorn and a blanket. Humor, how quaint. The figure raised a small cube, flickering with internal pulses. She's not yours, warrior. She belongs to the archive, and the archive belongs to us. Varel's tone turned cold enough to out-freeze the planet. Then come take it. The ice beneath the figure erupted, not from her, not from weapons, but from memory. A feedback surge from the shard she'd planted, like the ruins themselves rejected his presence. The man screamed as knowledge poured into him backwards. Recollections of pain, the taste of regret, the weight of centuries in a cage. When the light faded, he lay slumped, breathing but broken. Jalen whistled. Remind me not to make you mad. Varel didn't respond. She was trembling, not from cold, but from release. He was one of the architects, she murmured. I didn't know his face until the archive gave it back. Jalen stepped forward, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. You're not just remembering, you're becoming. She looked at him, eyes older than stars, and whispered, Then what happens when I remember all of it? He didn't have an answer, but he sat beside her anyway. The anti-nebulous zone was a riddle carved into space, a region where time folded like origami and laws of physics went on coffee break. Ships that entered without purpose tended to emerge as modern art. Naturally, that's where the archive core was hiding, because of course it was. Jalen Reese had once lost a toe in a war with a vending machine. Now he was flying into a legendary death fog with an ancient vampire, a bitter AI, and a borrowed map embedded in spinal memory. Life had a rhythm. The wayfarer's lament skidded into the zone like a drunk moth. The stars vanished. The surrounding dark wasn't empty. It was thick. It pressed against the hull, curious and uninvited. Lights on the dash flickered and danced, rearranging themselves into constellations no sane galaxy recognized. Jalen drummed his fingers on the console. Kraken, status report? Thrusters at 93% functionality. Life support stable. Sanity? Debatable. Also, I'm seeing duplicate versions of you reflected in my sensor readings. One of them has a mustache. It's upsetting. Note to self, never grow a mustache. Varel stood near the viewport, eyes unfocused. Her cloak fluttered without wind. It's near, I can feel it. Breathing. You sure it's the core and not the ship after Bean Paste Day? She gave him a half smile. The core's signal pulses in a language only memory can speak. It's calling. As if on cue, space peeled open. There was no sound, just a shift, a reality blink. And then it appeared, a station the size of a small moon, shaped like a spiraled eye, orbiting a singularity without falling in. Lights pulsed across its surface, forming words in a language that made Jalen's molars ache. They docked. The hangar bay was deserted, save for a collection of floating jellyfish encased in translucent suits. They drifted forward, bioluminescent tendrils twitching. Great, Jalen muttered. Ethereal squids. Every Tuesday ends like this. One jellyfish glowed in rhythmic pulses. Kraken, translated. They say, Welcome, Lady Codebreak. We feared you were lost. Varel nodded almost reflexively. They're archive guardians, remnants of the first data siphons. They remember what they were designed to forget. That sounds healthy. They passed through halls of shifting architecture, where walls grew veins of light and doors responded to emotion more than keys. The core chamber itself sat behind a veil of mist-like energy. As they stepped through, an AI flickered into view, a humanoid projection, hunched slightly, with bags under its digital eyes and a name tag that read Ted. Hi, it sighed. I'm Ted, Temporal Enlightenment Database. You've got mail. Also, trauma. Jalen blinked. Did I just give me emotional baggage? Ted gestured toward Varel. She's the key. She's the lock. She's the archive and the eraser. But unlocking the core requires consent from the other half. What other half? Varel turned to Jalen. You touched me. The day we met, you sparked it. Now you're encoded. He pointed at himself. Me? I'm a glorified Uber driver with commitment issues. Ted coughed politely. You're also the only organic currently tethered to her signal. If you refuse to help unlock the core, the system stays dormant. If you agree, we light up the biggest memory engine in the known universe. Will it explode? Yes. No. Maybe. Jalen groaned. Of course. Fine. Let's light it up. He reached for her hand. As they connected, the room went supernova, light, sound, and memory crashing through him like tidal waves of lives he'd never lived. He saw her past, experiments, imprisonment, the crushing loneliness of being the last, the broken, the forgotten. Then silence. Ted appeared, tears of light dripping from his cheeks. Access granted, Jalen wobbled. Why are you crying? Because I remember my name used to be Brenda and I made scones. Varel's eyes glowed, bright and calm. The core is awake. Jalen exhaled. Now what? She turned to him, and something vast and peaceful settled across her features. Now we decide what to do with a god. The stars above council space looked cleaner than they had any right to be. Sanitized, curated, arranged like a brochure for order. Jalen Reese stood at the helm of Wayfarer's Lament, orbiting just beyond the defense net of High Citadel Prime, and tried not to vomit from the tension. Behind him, Varel adjusted the deep violet clasp of her cloak. Her ears, once hidden, were now proudly visible. Long, graceful, glowing faintly with the biolight of the reawakened archive. Her presence pulsed with memory and gravity, and the ship's lights dimmed around her as if trying to accommodate a new kind of truth. Tell me again, Jalen muttered, why we're about to knock on the front door of the same people who tried to gift wrap you like a glorified houseplant? Because, she said calmly, we're not knocking. They were broadcasting. Ted's signal, fully integrated into the archive core, and now delightfully reprogrammed with therapy subroutines and a mild addiction to opera, had been beaming a memory cascade to every major intelligence grid in council space. Not just data, but experiences. Footage from the consortium's early vampire experiments. First-hand records of council complicity. Centuries of forgotten victims made suddenly real. It was spreading like a virus made of truth. Message received, KRAKEN announced rather gleefully. They're panicking. At least one ambassador tried to blame it on rogue weather balloons. Also, there's a trending hashtag, #NotMyPet. Jalen allowed himself a grin. Finally, a scandal I don't have to cover up with plasma. They docked. When they stepped onto the floor of the Grand Assembly, there was no applause this time. Only silence, as rows of delegates stared at the woman they had once named Property 88A. Varel didn't flinch. She walked to the center of the marble tile stage, each step leaving a faint shimmer on the floor behind her. Jalen followed close enough to stand with her, but far enough to let her speak for herself. I am not your project, she said. I am not your mistake. I am not your entertainment. Her voice echoed, not through the chamber, but through every comm feed, every media line, every neural broadcast from the archive's awakened interface. I am memory. I am proof. I am every broken life. You tried to delete. No one moved. Jalen leaned in slightly and added, also, she hates leashes. Just putting that out there. The council tried diplomacy. They tried denial. They tried, of all things, a very polite offer to study the phenomena further. Varel declined by letting the core pulse again, broadcasting a historical loop of one of the council's former chancellors, doing something deeply undignified with an energy vine and a misunderstanding of vampire biology. And then they left. No chase, no fire, no bounty, just silence. Wayfarer's Lament drifted away from council space as the galaxy reeled from the truth. Ted chose a lullaby to play as they slipped into the outer systems, where old tech lay buried and forgotten, waiting to be repurposed for something nobler. So, Jalen said, kicking his boots up on the console, now that we've toppled a government and destabilized multiple data markets, what next? Fancy a vacation? I hear the lava pools of Tender 9 are great for the pores. Varel sat beside him, no longer curled inwards, her shoulders relaxed, her eyes calm. We plant, she said. We rebuild. We create something better. He looked at her, remembering the trembling creature they'd first shoved at him in a cage. You always this optimistic? She tilted her head. Number you infected me with it. He smiled. My bad. They sat in companionable silence as stars passed by, some new, some impossibly old. In the med bay, Lords of Passion, Galaxy Edition. Still sat bookmarked, page 243, where the Moon Witch finally kissed the Duke. Jalen didn't know what the galaxy would become, but he knew it would remember. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.